Welcome to Science to Sorcery, the podcast where we explore topics where science and spirituality may overlap. I'm Jake Marco. I'm a life activation practitioner and ritual master in the Modern Mystery School. Today I have with me Julie Grimm, who is a certified guide and ritual master in the Modern Mystery School. Julie has also worked in the biotech industry for the last 8 years, and did her master's research on nerve cell fusion and repair. Julie, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Jake. I'm so excited to be on Spirit Science to Sorcery.
Science to sorcery. Ah,
Yeah.
so Julie, so you've had a somewhat similar experience to me of being in, from a scientific background, from a biology background, and then you found your way into a spiritual path. What did that look like for you?
As I'm sure happened with you, or as you can imagine, it did not happen all at once. It was a slow, progressive change that especially in the beginning, battled. My ego, we should say, my negative ego, the personality masks did not want to let go of the identity that I had crafted very intentionally with a lot of effort, right? I had gotten the fancy lab jobs. I had, pursued this very academic career. I was very clear this is what I wanted to do. I studied hard. I got the grades. I went to my grad school program. I got the job, and I did not feel the way I thought I should feel. I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel content. And I kind of looked around going, is this it? But that
Is this what
said,
life has?
yeah, this is what I worked so hard for. But I wasn't trying to give it up. It was kind of like, can we make this a little bit more fun or something? But I did not think that I was going to have to basically change career paths, get re-educated. And if you had told me that I would be doing anything close to what I'm doing now 10 years ago, I would have said, you're whack and you've lost your mind.
So what, how did you find because obviously it sounded like you were at a place where you had followed a path for a while. You had sort of that set in your mind, and then you got to a place where you realized it didn't get you the promises you sort of expected.
Didn't lead
So,
where I was sold. I was sold, and I sold myself. Okay. We're not going to put all the blame externally, but I was sold and I sold myself this story that when I got here, when I got here, when I got here, then I'd feel
yeah.
happy. I'd feel content. It would be enough. And, in the mix of all of this, I also had a spiritual awakening where I could feel chakras, I could see auras. I really tried to shove it in the closet and go, that's cool. Back to what I'm actually here to do. Right. And unfortunately, it does not work that way. And of course, it was a good thing. I'm saying that jokingly. But I really did sort of fight in the beginning. I didn't want to let go of my paradigm. I didn't want to let go of my worldview, even though that was what was causing me the angst and that's what was causing me to suffer. I was extremely attached to it. And as I had sort of explained, I put a lot of effort into cultivating it. So, it was a series of events, but I had a spiritual awakening. I had a felt experience of the spiritual energies that we work on when we do life activation, for example. I could feel them and see them, and I could not deny anymore that they were not real. So that was
How did
probably
that happen?
I had a sort of spontaneous awakening in my I finished my grad school. It's a trite story. Finished my grad school, traveled through India for 2.5 months and had a spiritual awakening in India. Came back to the US. I hadn't lived in the US at that point in about 4 years. So came back fresh with this like very different felt lived experience of essentially the oneness. I had this oneness experience with life that literally blew my mind. Came back to Massachusetts, where I'm from, to the Boston area. It's a very academic, biotech heavy area for those who do not know. And, got my little biotech job and really tried to go, that's over here. Let's carry on, onward and upward.
That was a
And
cool experience. That'll be a fun story to tell to
yeah,
people. And now here we go, back on the path.
back on the path. And also, it was my first time really working in biotech. So I had been in grad school and I had had like internships and lab projects and whatnot, but I had never worked really in the field, in the industry, which is very, very different. And so, and I was back in Boston, right? There were like 100 things happening at once for me. And so I was really having a hard time understanding what to do about, like, I knew that it wasn't working. I knew that I was suffering. I knew that I was in pain. I was feeling extremely disenchanted. But at the same time, it's not that there was like a clear next step for me. So I actually started to meditate a lot and found a woman who teaches meditation, who then became my spiritual guide. And I would go to her office and do meditation. And basically, that experience for me was like taking a breath. Like I could take a breath in that office. And I had in the meditations, I was having visuals of like the pyramids and all this stuff that's like totally outside my paradigm. And I go up to her, I'm like, why am I seeing such a pyramids? Like, what's up with that? And she told me, oh, actually, I study in this spiritual lineage called the lineage of King Solomon coming through Egypt. And I'm like, I feel no connection to Egypt. I feel no connection to the pyramids. Some people I meet, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been an avid studier of this for so long. And I'm like, no. And honestly, like, let's not have it. I just wanted to do this thing over here. Right. And
Hmm.
yeah, just as I'm trying to be very stubborn, continuing on with what my mind wants me to do, meanwhile, my heart, my soul is calling me to this whole other, essentially, reality that I, prior to that time, didn't even know existed, wouldn't have believed existed had you tried to tell it to me. It was really just through my own felt and lived experience that slowly and slowly this box that I had put myself in was being dismantled. And then at some point, I kind of took up my own hand and go, okay, fine, I'll help with this, since it's already happening. And I am feeling more creative. I am having more joy. I am having a greater sense of this unity and connection to life. Like, let's follow that.
Mm. So it sounds like you had this, this one experience in India that sort of was like a spark of inspiration of like, there is some way of feeling into something here. And then you started to like sort of along this new path you had found in Boston had started like you had this little check-in of like, wait, no, I feel that again. Like what? Okay, I'll keep going because I felt that the first time, and now you started to like get that more sustainable connection.
Yeah, and feedback. And honestly, it just, even the meditation alone, not even a life activation, but simply just meditating for 1 hour, one time a week, I started to see myself and how I was basically sabotaging myself in different interactions, like my boss. Okay, part of my dissatisfaction wasn't simply the field. There were some poor boundaries at work, things like that. And so from the meditation alone, I started to see, oh, I'm like constantly saying yes when my answer is no. Okay, let's like not do that anymore, right? Because part of what the spiritual awakening did for me, yes, it showed me this really big picture. And then life showed me everything in my life that had nothing to do with that big picture, which was literally everything in my life. So it was sort of like, here's this beautiful oneness that is the truth of who we are.
Mhm.
And then here's your life, like so compartmentalized, so rigid, so overly structured, so separate. And it was painful. It was very painful to face each of those instances for me. So the meditation, and then especially when I did the life activation healing and the Empower Thyself class, which is an initiation into lineage, that's really where I could start to integrate that really big spiritual picture that I was given into my day-to-day reality and create a little bit more of that. Well, what does it mean to be one with life?
Mm.
What does it mean? I was given this vision of essentially that we were children playing in a big sand castle. And it's like, okay, well, what does that really mean to be sort of like in this sandcastle of life and building our hopes and our dreams? And because I wasn't really doing that, I was living somebody else's hopes and dreams. I was living from only my mind and not from my heart at all.
So then in your life, when you started to make these shifts and live more in your heart, like what did that actually look like? How did that change what you were doing?
So it started honestly with having more joy, like instantly. I knew that the life activation worked. I came into the life activation, I was extremely skeptical. I kind of thought, okay, worst thing, it's just a waste of my money. And that's really the expectation that I had for it.
Yeah. Like we can recover from that.
Yeah, it was sort of like, okay, this isn't working. I know I need some other help. I trust her. We've had some really great meditation experiences. Like, let's just try it.
Yeah.
And but if it's $200 down the drain, then that's it. Which is not that I was flush with cash, but that was simply my mentality going into it. And I was honestly blown away and shocked by how much joy, how much creativity, like really life entered my existence immediately following the life activation. So I started to paint a lot. I had always loved to paint. I had always loved art along with the science, but I put it to the side. I put it away because it didn't make sense. There wasn't right. It didn't align with my career goals and whatnot. And then so I just started to paint. And I tell people this story. It's like out of nowhere, I started to paint and paint and paint. And I painted like 12 paintings. And then I worked in a biotech incubation center. So there's multiple startup biotechs in this one building. And they put up, do you do art? We want to hang some of our clients' art. So all of a sudden, I have like 8 paintings hanging in this biotech incubator center. And I sell my first ever painting. Somebody buys it.
Wow.
And that's in like 2 months post the life activation. So I'm doing no art whatsoever. Life activation, a lot of art. It's all hanging in an office building in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and somebody buys my first ever painting. It was like, what just happened?
Now, what did that feel like going from, being a person who had worked on this path of science for so long, had put away this artistic side of yourself, to then, after what, a month or two, decide like, I'm actually going to start creating, and then have someone else be like, that is valuable.
It was huge. It was huge for me, but it was pure magic. Like I have my little sign there. The magic is in you. It's probably reversed for you, but it was pure magic. And so that's how I talk about like, that the life activation worked because it's magic, that something that's outside of your realm of what's possible becomes possible. Because that was so outside the realm of my reality that it even happened was like, it was actual magic. And it was surprising. Like it surprised even me. Although I was the one making all the art. It was like, well, where did this come from? It was
Yeah,
like,
is that
oh
like
my
what did
goodness.
you expect that to change? Like, was that something that you
No,
were expecting to come up? It was in your radar at all? Like, I want to start painting.
no, no, no. It was just this huge creative influx happened. And actually, a very similar thing happened to me in my first ever tree of Kabbalah, where, you study the tree of life, you study manifestation, this huge influx of creativity. I wrote and illustrated a children's story, finally published it on Amazon. It was like, boom, this energy just needed to be expressed. And it was in a way that was so undeniable that I simply had to surrender to it and allow it to move through me. And that's really a lot of the big steps that I've taken. It's more just, it's like getting out of the way for the energy to flow through you and allowing yourself to express the way that you need to express. I was talking with a woman, she's very creative, Julia Tiffin. She's also a teacher within the Modern Mystery School. And she's an artist and she actually teaches art. And she talks about how the creativity will find its form. And I feel that that's so true. It's like we have the creative impulse. We don't necessarily have to worry so much about how to get it out because it's going to tell us how it wants to be gotten out. And then it's not easy. It's simple, but not easy. But we just have to make it happen, get out of the way and allow that creative impulse to move through our being. Yeah.
It's well, it's just so amazing to think about like I had also done the program and like I'm actually looking over there. I have my little statue that I made out of clay, which I had never worked with clay before, and just had this vision pop in my head of like a clay statue of like a person holding a sword. And it's like, all right, I guess I'm gonna make that and figure out how to do it. And I ran into a person randomly that uh, was a ceramicist, like had studied that in college, and was like, I can help you make something out of clay. And as we started working with it, I had this vision in my mind of what it was going to be. And as we were working, because of the constraints of the medium, like the actual outcome, the finished product started to be shaped by sort of the process of making it, and it like gains new meaning throughout doing the art. It was a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, isn't that so cool? That's how art is, that you have the vision and it almost never comes out exactly how you envision. So, right, there's like the big picture, and then you get down to it, and there's like skill level, exactly. You said the constraints of the medium, a million other things, and then all of a sudden you've created something totally new. So it's like a marriage between the two things, which I always find very exciting and fascinating. In a way, actually, so I study biology, right? And biology is a bit different, a bit similar rather, that you have a question or an objective or an outline for a study, right? And then you do it and you execute it. And again, it's almost never the way that you planned for it to go, that there was always something that worked, but not how you anticipated it working, or it didn't work as reliably as you thought it was going to, or there's so many variables that it,
Yeah, it's about 12 confounding factors going in there. You're just going to have to make assumptions and see how it goes.
yeah, yeah, but then always you're getting that feedback, right? That there of what the result really is. So it's always fascinating.
Mm. So then, throughout your progression, because you had started with this place of, very heavy on science, and you had sort of rejected this artistic, intuitive piece of yourself. After doing life activation and initiation, Kabbalah, and going through this sort of shift, did you end up finding yourself, coming into some balance between these two sides of yourself, or did you actually end up, rejecting this scientific side of yourself for some time?
Yeah, I definitely had to take a big step away from science. I really, really did. And even now to this day, I'm not as scientifically, like I used to read scientific journals for a good time, and I don't do that any longer. I do certainly, it's always going to be there as an aspect of me because I have that foundation. And so it's wired my brain a certain way. And there's like a language that I speak. But I definitely had to take a big step away. It's like, when you love something and then it doesn't work out, you got to take a break from it for a little bit. And so that's kind of what ended up happening with me in science. So I'm actually finally starting to come a little bit back into the scientific, but I really had to make some space for basically like a new understanding of who I was, which for me, and this isn't necessarily for everybody, but for me meant I had to create some distance. I had to create some space with that way of being.
So, having given space, what is your relationship now? Like, what does science look like to you, and how has that changed?
That's a good question. I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade here. Okay. So, what's interesting? So I've read some articles like back from the early 1900s, for example, like some of the scientific articles written about the discovery of different like chromosomes and things like that. And even the articles written back then, there isn't artistry that is at the bedrock of the experiments, of even the language, whereas modern science has become extremely dry. It's like somebody sapped all the art that they possibly could out of science, which is not, I don't, science does not need to be like that. And I think it's actually a great detriment to science. I also wonder, and I experienced this to some degree as well within my uh, graduate program, that science, similar to art, you could make the claim honestly about modern art that it's been subjected to the same thing, but are people asking the questions that they're curious about, that they really desire to get the answers to? Or are they asking questions that they can get funded? Are they asking questions that lead to money? Are they asking questions that from a logical standpoint lead to whatever sort of monetary outcome they might need? Which I'm not trying to say it's wrong or this other thing, but it just for me is not very compelling. I don't get excited about that. And I think that it is greatly hampering true scientific innovation. So I would argue that, modern science, and that's not to say I'm sure there's lots of amazing stuff going on. I'm just simply not aware of it. But a lot of my modern science, from what I saw, is following the money. So basically, it's selling itself for money rather than true scientific inquiry, which is where the actual discovery is going to be made. And it both divorced itself from the spirituality and from the artistry that would enhance it. So I think science is amazing. I actually think that in this next, the new paradigm, as people would call it, right, in this next stage of human evolution that we're all entering into, that technology and science are going to be so key. There's going to be like key discoveries, key innovations. From what I see right exactly now, I'm not very inspired.
Hmm. Yeah, it actually reminds me of I took a storytelling class when I had gone to grad school. I was studying biomedical engineering, but I took this class that was just is by this storytelling, like she wasn't, it wasn't even for credit. It was just this person who was in had built a career on telling stories and capturing stories. And she had this, first class of storytelling for engineers and scientists. And she kept saying, the first thing was that everyone has a story. Everyone has lots of stories. Um, and the other piece was that people, generally speaking, people don't care about the science. They don't care about the engineering. They care about like the wow, the awe, the what gets you out of bed in the morning to work on this science, to make this new discovery, to invent this groundbreaking thing. And like you said, like, that's what inspires people.
Yeah, and the other question is, so we talk about Kabbalah where you learn to ask questions, ask really good questions of life. So I would say, is the scientific community asking the right questions?
Hmm.
Questions that are going to lead to breakthroughs, questions that are going to lead to discoveries, questions that are going to lead to advancements, versus there's a lot of like hair splitting, or it's become like so niche that, for example, like for somebody to corroborate what somebody's posted in a journal, to even say, okay, yeah, that's an okay study, like 3 years go by and they go, oh, never mind, we weren't able to replicate those results because it's been so niche. So like that for me is an example of, we're just cutting hairs here. We're not finding new things out. That's not obviously all of science, but in general, what I would like to see is more true research, true question asking of questions that to that scientist really matter, versus, and I would say I was very guilty of this, like we talked about even my career. I was following a career that I thought I should follow, doing things that I thought I should do, versus allowing that true creativity, that true inspiration, that true desire, that true curiosity to steer my actions, my questions, my behaviors. So, I kind of think modern science has followed that a bit too, where it's become so mental, so disembodied that it's lacking heart.
Lacking heart. So you've described a bit of what, having stepped away from science, stepped more into your heart, now starting to step back into science, like what that heart can bring to science. Now you're also stepping back into science for some reason, right? I imagine there's something that you can then gain from the other side of it. So what is that? What is science bringing to your heart?
So, I mean, I'm not actively going to go back to the lab. I think those days are
Mhm.
very clearly done. Science as a formula and a recipe for discovery is important to
Yeah.
everybody. So, like the scientific process of asking questions, like gathering data, that sort of structure, but it's not in any lab, maybe the lab of life, the laboratory of life. And I think science, it's the biological, I studied biology. So for me, it's the biological world. And the biological world is magical.
Mm.
Even, okay, I had to go get vitamin D tested and whatnot. And I'm going to read all about vitamin D because I want to know. And now I'm looking at, oh, that's how vitamin D operates in the body. Oh my God, that's so fascinating. And the engineering of it, like the perfect calibration of how to ensure that the body has enough vitamin D is actually kind of mind blowing. I remember reading Darwin's theory of evolution. He writes about God. He's talking about the eye and the evolution of the eye. And he writes, oh my, what kind of God? Only a God could make something so perfect and so beautiful. And I remember when I read that in college, I thought, oh, he's just talking about God to appease his colleagues at the time so that the theory would become acceptable. But now I'm like, no, no, no. Only God could engineer such a biological system that is so perfect. I mean, yes, we get ill and things happen, but by and large, the physical body is a miracle and its operations are a miracle. The way that it functions is miraculous. And so I teach meditation, and sometimes it will come through in meditation, the physics of light, the physics of the orbiting planets in the sky, the biology of the body, the biology of the breath. I was a tutor for a long time in anatomy and physiology. So I'm all about the physiology of the body, and it is precise, and how everything operates together. It is miraculous. And I think for me, it's even more indicative of that divine creation, which we are.
It's so interesting. And I imagine, people listening might hear you. And just like you as a college student, read this thing about, we're talking about evolution, but then we're also talking about God. It's like, well, how do those work together? And I guess I'll let you answer that. Like how do those two concepts work together? Because I think a lot of people will see them as opposing forces.
I mean, God for me is not a concept. It was a concept. Then I had felt lived physical experiences of God. And
Hmm.
so God for me is not a concept, it's a reality that I would be insane. I would be insane to argue with. I would have to be out of my mind because I would be arguing with something that is a felt lived reality of my existence. So it'd be like if I'm trying to be like, oh, well, the sky is not blue or something like that. Um,
Hmm.
and so science and scientific discovery they're a way for us again to ask questions of life and to come to a greater understanding of life. And of course, as we grow in our discoveries, we ask better questions. We learn how to refine our protocols. We get enhanced techniques. We get, that laser focus. We get new questions, basically. For me, God is always there. It's not a hypothesis. I understand that for some people it still is. And that's why, for me, the Empower Thyself class and the Universal Hermetic Ray Kabbalah journey were huge ways for me to have that felt lived experience of who and what is God. So it's not a question for me any longer. And it really was. Well, it was not even a question before because it was like a straight up dismissal. And then it was a question. And now it's a reality. So, yeah, I don't have there. It's not a debate really for me. And if it is for
Yeah.
somebody, which I can totally understand, and they're interested in having that experience, I would definitely recommend start obviously with the life activation and then find a certified guide to do the Empower Thyself class because I know for myself, I was living in a huge state of separation that caused so much pain within my being. And it's like, we don't have to live there. We don't have to live like that. Yes, it is going to take a dismantling of your identity that you've erected, but sometimes life has already taken a sledgehammer to that. So why not help it along, pick it on up and just, take one for the team. And then you'll actually, when you lean in, you'll discover, wow, why don't do the earth hurt so much better over here, you know?
Yeah. And then you can actually start to like progress, evolve, move forward. It's just such an interesting thing that we've, talked a lot about, this idea of like you originally thought of like with this evolution thing, but there's this God thing, but like they kind of like they do work together. Is that like with, divinity, with progression in the light, like that helps evolution, that helps progression.
Yeah.
They're actually things that work together.
I again, so the greats, whoever is the greats for you, the great thinkers, the great scientists, the great writers, the great poets, the great painters, they didn't happen upon their greatness. And in
Hmm.
fact, you and I know many of them were initiates. They were initiated into their greatness. And through that initiation, granted keys to unlock the mysteries of the universe. These are keys to discover. This is how the human mind discovers that we ask questions, we refine, we narrow. And then sometimes we chance upon the key. Well, guess what? There's the mystery school, which holds all the keys one could ever need. And with that structure, which you're given, you're not given all at once, okay? It's too much anyway. But especially in power
Game of
stuff,
inches.
you're given a huge amount already just there to unlock. Maybe it's a discovery, like Nikola Tesla was an initiate. This I used to think brilliant minds just sort of grew up that way, and it's like absolutely not. Well, they studied, we know that for sure. They refined their craft, absolutely. And as well, many of them were given sacred teachings in the mysteries that really allowed them to open their consciousness to, again, it's like the mysteries, the discoveries that are just outside the realm, the magic, and to bring down that innovation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very inspiring then to see that oh, the greats aren't just some group that, lucky to be them. It's like, no, that actually makes it, when you frame it that way, it makes it something achievable.
It's attainable, totally attainable. We want to go, they had something I don't have. Okay, they did. It's called initiation, but you can have it too. Right. And as you
Yeah.
progress along the path and you gain access to these different tools of mastery, but it's mastery of the self, mastery of the universe. You start to go, oh, I can be great too. And then it's a question of what's my greatness, because we're each here for a different purpose. And so as we come into that greater knowledge, what's my greatness? What tools do I need to achieve my greatness? Then we can become sort of our own Shakespeare in our own right, crafting what it is that we're here to craft and anchoring that. Maybe it's scientific inquiry, maybe it's scientific advancement, maybe it's technological advancement, or something else. But whatever it is, starting to really bring it down.
Now, Julie, if people want to get in touch with you about how they can get more in touch with their greatness, how might they do that?
So I run a center here in Wellesley, Massachusetts. They are welcome to come on by. My website is spiritualstudiesinstitute.com. So I run Spiritual Studies Institute. You can find me on Instagram. It's at julie.e.grimm. And otherwise, I hope to see you. There's no time like right now. So we are in this moment of there's a lot of breakthrough, a lot of opportunity that's on the horizon. So more and more people are having that awakening, and they're awakening for a purpose, for a reason. So if you feel like there's some greatness inside of you, let me tell you, there is. And it's just a matter of getting the right toolkit for you and how to begin to bring that forward. So Spiritual Studies Institute in Wellesley, I'd be happy to assist.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julie. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you all for listening. This has been Science to Sorcery.
Thanks, Jake.